Hey, Internet PRL here. So I was having lunch with a friend of mine the other day. Well, I mean, if you consider Del Taco to be a passable meal. And, being the political nerds that we are, we found ourselves stumbling upon the topic of the federal budget. Others at work joined into the conversation, and it became evident really fast that no one had any real clear way of distinguishing the process from black magic. And I figured that the experience of this little lunch clique was probably indicative of something going on, outside the walls of our office. What is the federal budget? How does it work? And why does the government get shut down? These are the sorts of questions that I feel are rather simple, but the people who know the answers are putting them in ways that are, complicated and hard for us to understand and digest. So for you, Internet, and for those of you who managed to download this video onto an errant MP4 player before the dawn of the robotic apocalypse, here is how the budget process works in 3 minutes. Simple, easy, ready, go. First, the President creates a budgetary proposal for the upcoming fiscal year and prepares to send it to Congress by the first week of February, except it's more like a wish list because Congress is under no legal obligation to follow anything, and true to form, they rarely do. After the President carefully crafts what is essentially a near-certain precursor to an informal rejection slip, both the Senate and the House come up with their own budgets. These budgets cover the next 5 years of expenditures, which is funny because they're forced to make a new one any year anyway, so yeah. Once the House and Senate are happy with their individual responses to the President's proposal, they vote on them, and then send them on their merry way to a joint budgetary committee to hammer out the differences. Once that's finished, they bring the product to a vote, and if it passes, we're left with a complete bicameral agreement called a joint resolution. The resolution has 20 budget functions, which encompasses all of the federal spending projects. But again, it's not legally binding because the President doesn't sign it into law, so it's more like an outline. This is all supposed to be done before April 15th, but unlike us, if their federally mandated work isn't completed by that deadline, they're not at risk of a lien on their house. They just amend the deadline or pretend, not to notice. Now that the budget is finished, the details are sent out to the pertinent committees and subcommittees in the House and in the Senate. Their responsibility is to finally add some teeth to this process. The budget basically acts as a spending limit on a credit card, except, since it's only a blueprint, it's possible to fudge the line a little if need be. These committees and subcommittees try to officially articulate how much money organizations and agencies get and for what purpose by writing appropriation legislation. They'll amend these bills as necessary and then bring it to a vote. Once the committees agree, they then send it to the floor for yet another vote. Generally, the House would act first, and then the Senate Appropriations Committee would edit this version before presenting it to the chambers, but there have been a few times where they decided they were going to get this party started by themselves and that the House could just join in on their own terms. Either way, the discrepancies between the two need to be reconciled by yet another joint committee. The nuances get debated, angry words are broadcast to C-SPAN and then condensed in venomous sound bites for the less boring media, deals are brokered, compromises are forged, and they present their recommendations for consideration to both houses. Provided that they agree on these fixes and pass yet another vote, the appropriation legislation is then sent to the President to either be signed into law or vetoed. As you can see, this process is incredibly dependent upon the ability to compromise, which, may not exactly be the flavor of the week right now. In the event that the annual appropriations bills aren't agreed upon by the deadline, the affected organization runs out of money, i.e. parts of the government get shut down. This is generally frowned upon by the citizens since millions of people are on government payroll, and they prefer to actually have governments that aren't, broken. There is a way that the legislative branch can avoid this tragedy and veritable PR disaster. Continuing resolutions. These are basically shortcuts where the House and Senate stall by defaulting to what was appropriated last year. The idea is that they will have to come to an agreement by this next deadline, but that doesn't always happen either. In that case, stuff gets shut down and people get very angry. To be fair, it isn't always Congress's fault. 4 of the shutdowns over the last 30 years were caused by presidential vetoes. In fact, President Reagan's utilization of the veto resulted in 2 government shutdowns, and Presidents H.W. Bush and Clinton both caused one apiece. Another 2 would have been caused by Presidents Ford and Carter if Congress didn't step up with some sweet supermajority overrides. Keep in mind that these are really broad strokes. Entire books can and have been written on the topic of legislative budgetary procedures. But at least now you have a general appreciation for a process that is riddled with technicalities, addendums, and confusion. Dare to know, Internet. And thanks for watching.